Hi everyone, this is Jazz Cole, president and founder of Multilingual and Philanthropic Incorporated. This is another episode of Empathy Talks. So with this episode, I know it's been a while, but I try to make sure that these videos are purpose-driven, not just, I just want to put a video out there just for the sake of it. But I actually have something relevant I feel like is imparting to say in terms of imparting information on you. I think I might have mentioned this a while ago, I'm not sure, but I mentioned that I was going to start reading this book. I found this in my grandmother's garage. It's The Smartest Kids in the World and How They Got That Way by Amanda Ripley. I don't know if I'm saying her last name right, but that's just what I think it is. You can probably correct me later if you know her name, but she's a very good journalist, has a pretty good resume considering she's worked with Time, I think the Atlantic and Slate and a bunch of others. But basically she talks about literally where to find smart kids, because there's this international test. It's called PISA. And it basically it's a test translated into about, I think, 40 different languages, and basically that's how it measures intelligence in terms of like seeing where people are around the world and how they compare when it comes to math scores, when it comes to reading, when it comes to science, which are very important. And so I forget what this test is called. It's called PISA, and I forget what it stands for. It is Program for International Student Assessment. Yeah. So basically where they found these kids scoring the highest were in Finland, Korea, and Poland, at least at the top three. Those are the places that they pretty much focused on within this book. She basically follows 3 different exchange students from America who go there, and then in some cases she also evaluates students who are from other countries who are coming to the United States, and kind of comparing what their education system is like, because it's the whole point of it is like smartest kids and how they got that way. So being able to go there and actually investigate what does their education system look like, how are these kids really being able to study? How are they being taught? What is the reason why they're getting these high test scores? And it's very fascinating. I think it's a really great book if you are a parent or an educator who's looking for an idea of how to best educate their kids. I personally recommend it. The book was published, I want to say, in 2013, but even though it's like nearly 8 years old, it still has a lot of really relevant information in terms of how to educate. And I feel like it's really important to as a parent to really, I'm not a parent yet in my lifetime. I'm only in my mid-20s, but in the idea of looking at how can I best help my kid not only, be smart, but also get opportunities, and also, basically get, make themselves open to all these different opportunities that are available, especially when it comes to any parent who is looking at sending their kids to some foreign country for a foreign exchange program. And so I think personally, I think it's always worthwhile doing an exchange program, because you get a sense of being able to get out and see what's different from you, because you don't always notice certain things in your own education system that may be debilitating until you go somewhere else, and then you just find out what works and what doesn't work. And it's not about saying one education system is better or worse than another, but it's really just about looking at how can we basically make things better. And I think that, when you ask yourself questions like, how can I be better? How can I, be best involved? And one of the things that they were talking about when it comes to education is that that a lot of like what parent involvement looks like it is modeled differently. For example, in the US, I mean, we think that it's like really, really good to be involved on our schools, our son or daughter's PTA team, or like being the soccer mom and taking everyone to the games, and coaching your kids' basketball team or something like that. That's great involvement, but in terms of academic involvement, they were saying that can look differently from the sense of reading to your kids every night, or at dinner, like, I don't know, like talking about, asking them questions about what they learned so that they're retaining that information. Because people learn best by telling other people, or, like for me, when my languages, it's usually I learn best and I solidify what I know through teaching other people. That's how knowledge is shared and how it's also retained. So just the idea of that's the kind of involvement that is going to really push your kid academically. Whether it be, going to parent-teacher conferences. My parents did that all the time. Parent-teacher conferences, just to get the evaluation. I remember when I was much younger, I went to private school from the time that I was like old enough to go to school to up to about 3rd grade. So from there, it was very, the structure of private school, at least the Montessori school that I went to, was that you are taught independence. Autonomy is so important. They said that if you want your kids to be independent, you should send them to Montessori school. At least that was what they told my dad at the orientation. Not to say that you have to send your kids to private school for them to, develop independence, but from private school on, I remember learning about, just like things from washing tables and chairs, like basic like responsibilities as like an adult, because like later on as an adult, you're going to be washing dishes, you're going to be clean, keeping your space clean. We were learning things like I remember doing an after school program for Spanish, and that was really worthwhile. I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention then, just because I was a kid and I kind of, I don't know, I guess it didn't really fit my interest at the time, but it was still worthwhile of taking it, because I still remember I remembered some of it when I first started picking it back up in college and furthering my Spanish skills. I also remember we learned, learning things like, like multiplication and subtraction and addition, like basic, operations of like math operations and those kinds of things. We were like playing these little games and things like that. We didn't really have homework. It was more of you learn everything there. We sang songs. We were able to do different activities around reading. Like I remember one of my teachers, her name was Miss Mason at the time. I think she got married, but got married since then. But I remember she used to read aloud to us all the time. And then I remember we did this like art project around that book, and that was pretty fun. So, you have this sense of being able to, like I said, you don't have to send your kids to private school to get that, but it's just when it comes to parent involvement, it was just a standard. So as you get older, it's like, that's kind of how it was. My parents have always, even though when I transitioned from private school to a performing arts school later on, was that I grew up with parents who were like, hey, there's a B on your report card, there's a C, God forbid a C. It's like, what is this about? We need to go talk to your teacher about this. And I remember someone did that for my brother, and one of the teachers said to my parents, it's like, people don't come in when their kid has a D, you're coming in when they have a B, and people don't even come in for their kids when they have a very below average grade. And so I think if you want to be a very involved parent, I think it's really important to be involved with the academics, and also just reinforcing skills that are just really important. One of the things I'm really looking forward to as an au pair in Germany coming up soon at the end of this month is I'm looking forward to being able to impart English in a way that's going to be very conductive. There's another book that I read. I listened to the audiobook, but it was called How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. It's a very good book if you're trying to, like not necessarily discipline your kids, but you're trying to find a way to cooperate with kids and treat them like adults. Because the way that kids work is that kids are people. So they do have feelings, and I acknowledge that, especially with my cousin, who she's turning 3 at the end of this year. But I've literally held her in my arms like around the time that she was born. And so now it's kind of like she's almost 3 and I'm like, what happened? So, especially like watching her language skills improve from babbling to actually being able to say coherent phrases. She can't always, there's certain words she can't say because they're a little complicated, like spaghetti, because she knows what spaghetti is. She'll say getty, but we know it's spaghetti, those kinds of things where you're starting to develop, developing complicated sounds. But when it comes to working with your children, like treating your kids as adults and being able to kind of work with them so that way that they're not, you're not fighting with your kids all the time. And I think that's really important. I'm not a parent, but I know that as a person who plans to have kids in the future, that's a very good skill to have, is for your kids to listen to you and actually respect what you say. One of the things they were talking about is the fact that kids, like, especially under a certain age, they really like to play. That's like their main thing. Like even with my cousin, I come over to my house and she's like, oh, Jazz is here. It's like, oh, let's go upstairs and play in my room. Like I got this toy or something I want to show you, this and all this stuff, which is what that is. And I remember she threw her socks on the floor and she just so excited. She's like, confetti. And, and I said, and I want to make sure that she cleaned them up before we left the room. And I said, hey, how fast can we clean this up? I'll race you. And she said, okay, I help. And she just took them and put them away. Because I know that sometimes people feel like they have to yell at their kids and say, oh my gosh, you need to clean this up. And it's like kids don't really respond to that, I think. So I think it's really important to treat them as an adult and meet them where they're at. In the learning process, even with learning a second language, because I know that I have spoken to my cousin in French, and so I remember when she said her first word in French, which was really easy. It was oui, yes. So there's that, and with that aspect, I think it's really important to just work with them, because like for me, as an au pair, going to impart English onto 4-year-old triplets, like little girls. At 4 years old, it's going to be really ineffective for me to just teach them English in the sense of like a classroom setting, because they're not ready for that. Could you imagine like me telling 3 4-year-old girls, hey, we're going to sit down, we're going to open our textbooks and we're going to learn English. It's like, I'm bored. What are we playing? Their attention spans are not built for having those kinds of things. That's like later on. But the fact is that play is something that's really important to them. That's actually my number one responsibility as an au pair with my kids, is to play with the kids. And that's a good way to impart English. Reading stories, because kids do like stories. They like picture books. One of the things I used to do with my cousin when I bought her some books from Paris when I studied abroad there. And I basically just recorded myself reading them, because I know I'm not going to be around her all the time, and I'm the only one in my family that can actually read it to her. So I just read that to her, and then her parents played it for her. So, those are just things that can be imparted in meeting them where they're at. Because my cousin, I was telling you right now, she gets so excited when I walk in the door, and it's really... I think when you have that kind of influence with kids, where, and sometimes animals, I remember like yesterday I was at my mom's friend's house, and this dog I've never seen before, I've never really interacted with, just comes over and it's just like, I like her, I'm going to sit over here for a while. I'm going to follow her around a lot of times. So, when you have that sort of influence with children, naturally, I think it's important to nurture that. If you're a person where kids are drawn to you, or even animals are drawn to you, in my case, you want to nurture that so that you're able to best create a relationship with these kids. Because I feel like a lot of times and they mentioned in the book, is that you cannot you have to realize that kids are always people. At the end of the day, they're people. They're just small. and really young, and so sometimes you do have to meet them where they're at, but you have to remember that they do have feelings, they have thoughts. So, treating them like human beings. I know that, I think I might have mentioned this a while back, but I remember someone that I knew from student activities back at FIDM when I was still studying there, she said that she would talk to her kids like adults, and people were saying, "Oh, you talk to that kid like it's a person." It's like, it is a person, it's just small. It's just a small person. So, you can't forget that. And I think, when we yell at kids or when we scream at them because they're not doing what we want them to do, we have to think about it also from the child's perspective, because that's how usually what it is when you're an adult, is that when you don't agree on things, typically you have to figure out how to work it out. It's like if you want to go to this restaurant and your friend is going this place, and I don't know if that's a really good example, but basically, it's like you're gonna have to figure out, okay, how do we compromise? Because like they were talking about giving information, like saying, like, if you want to make sure that your kid is not playing roughly with the youngest kid who may be like a toddler, and giving information in a sense of saying, hey, I really don't want the baby to get hurt, because you're instilling in the child to think about other people. It's like, oh, I don't want you to hurt the baby. Oh, I have to hold your hand because I don't want you to, it's basically imparting to them information about your feelings. And it also helps them understand that. One of the things that Brooklyn does, I think is so important. I remember one time, she was playing and she ended up hitting me in the face, and I was pretending to cry. I was like, oh my God, you hit me. And she just takes my hands from my face and she goes, I'm sorry. And she gives me a kiss. So, imparting kids, and like you said, kids do, they're people, they have feelings, and you have to also teach them to acknowledge other people's feelings. And that kind of makes it really, makes a really big difference. So, and I think that babies and kids, they're born into this world to really love people unconditionally. So if you impart information like that, it makes it easier for them to say, well, I won't do that anymore because that hurt Jazz. In that case, being able to say, or giving children the sense of being able to be in charge, to say, okay, well, we got to come up with a solution, because what can we play that's quiet while the baby's napping? It's like, oh, well, we could do this. Telling your kids, it's like, if you ever give them a sense of being able to run with their imagination, it's pretty interesting, and being able to actually put them in charge of making creating their own options, and that can help create autonomy. So I really just wanted to share that. I know that's kind of a little bit off topic, but in terms of language and culture, which is primarily what I focus on, but I feel with education in general, when it comes to teaching a language, or in general teaching anyone anything, I think it's really important that we learn how to work with kids. We learn how to, especially if you're a parent, because I know being a parent is probably much worse than being a teacher, because you're with these kids every single day, at their worst time. I know as educators, I know that's also a tough job, because especially if you teach younger children, and I know that's going to teach, that's probably going to teach you about patience, especially since with 3 little girls, I don't know what my experience is going to look like with them, but I think the important thing is to be patient. That's what my parents have always imparted with me, and also being able to just, let them be, don't, not being a person that's just kind of taking their autonomy away, being able to work with them, because eventually you're gonna end up teaching people to be compromising and very open and collaborative people. I think that's the kind of people that we should be raising. So as usual, I try to make this 15 to 20 minutes. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this really helps you in any way possible. And I hope that you read this book, because I really personally recommend it, just because it is so good. A lot of valuable information. I don't know if you can see this, but I literally highlighted, I bookmarked, and then I also highlighted as well. Just so many good things. So that's my parting words, and I will see you in the next Empathy Talk.